The fishing village of San Isidro lay quiet under a pale moon. The waves lapped gently against the stilt houses, and the wind carried the salty tang of the sea. At the far end of the beach stood an ancient mangrove tree, massive and gnarled, its roots snaking deep into the sand. Its leaves were so thick that moonlight barely touched the ground beneath it. The villagers never went near it after sunset. They called it Puno ng Item na Bante, the tree of the Black Watcher. It was said that if you stared long enough into the tangled branches, you would see him, a towering man, his skin as black as charred wood, crouched among the limbs, watching you, unblinking. Marina, a young woman in her 20s, had grown up with the legend. Her father was a fisherman, her mother a small-time fish vendor. They always warned her, "Son, never pass under the mangrove at night. The Bante takes the curious." But Marina didn't believe it. She thought it was just a way to keep children from wandering too far from the village. One evening, while selling leftover fish to a nearby barangay, Marina had to take the long path back home. The tide was rising, and the quickest route cut straight across the shoreline, right under the mangrove tree. As she approached, the air grew unnaturally still. Even the waves seemed to quiet. She felt eyes on her. Slowly, she looked up. There he was. A massive figure crouched among the branches, motionless yet somehow breathing. His eyes glowed faintly, a dull red, like embers hidden in ash. Marina's breath hitched. She blinked. He was gone. The next morning, the whole village buzzed with bad news. Ernesto, a fisherman, had gone missing. His boat had been found drifting just a few meters from the mangrove. Inside was his fishing net, ripped to shreds, and the hull was streaked with something black and sticky. Old Lola Feli, the village elder, claimed she knew what had happened. "The Bante has taken him. He guards something beneath that tree. Something cursed. Every fool who disturbs him is never seen again." The men scoffed at her, but they were careful not to fish near the mangrove that day. Marina, however, couldn't get the image of the red-eyed figure out of her head. That night, she visited Lola Feli to learn the truth. The old woman told her of a time long before the village was built, when the shores were ruled by warring tribes. One warrior, Agalan, was betrayed by his own chieftain. Bound and beaten, he was left to die beneath the mangrove tree, which the enemies believed was sacred. They slit his throat and let his blood soak into the roots. But the mangrove drank more than his blood, it drank his spirit. And so, Agalan remained, fused to the tree, his body growing black like the bark, his soul bound to guard what was buried beneath, a chest of cursed gold, offered to the sea gods for victory in war. Since then, anyone who dared approach with greed, or simply at the wrong time, was taken. A few days later, a newcomer arrived in San Isidro, a man named Victor, brash and arrogant. He laughed at the villagers' stories. When he heard of the cursed gold, he saw an opportunity. One moonless night, armed with a machete, he marched to the mangrove, declaring loudly to Marina and the others who followed him at a distance, "I'll climb the damn tree and prove it's just a story." The villagers stayed far back, too afraid to interfere. Marina hid among them, her stomach twisted in dread. Victor reached the trunk and began hacking at the roots. The sound of metal striking wood echoed unnaturally loud. Then, silence. A low, guttural growl rolled out from the canopy. The villagers froze. Marina's heart pounded. From the branches above, a massive black figure uncurled itself. Taller than Any man, broad-shouldered, with limbs like thick branches, the Black Watcher dropped to the sand without a sound. Victor screamed and swung his machete. The figure caught his arm effortlessly. There was a sound like snapping wood, Victor's arm bending the wrong way, before the Watcher dragged him into the shadows beneath the tree. His screams cut off abruptly. The next morning, the villagers found Victor's machete sticking upright in the sand. His footprints led to the mangrove, but there were no footprints coming back. Marina couldn't sleep that night. She kept hearing whispers on the wind, like someone calling her name. Drawn by some unknown force, she found herself walking toward the shoreline. When she reached the mangrove, the air was thick and damp, smelling of salt and rot. She looked up. He was there again. But this time, he wasn't crouched. He stood tall, his face fully visible in the moonlight. Scars crossed his skin like dried cracks in wood. His mouth moved, but his voice was deep and hollow. "Leave, before the sea takes you." Marina stumbled back, fear and curiosity warring inside her. But as she turned to run, she noticed something, a glint of gold half buried in the sand near the roots. She didn't touch it. Weeks later, life in the village returned to normal, at least on the surface. But Marina knew the truth. The Black Watcher was still there, bound to the mangrove, guarding the cursed gold and waiting for the next fool to test him. And some nights, when the wind is still and the waves are quiet, you can see him, towering, unmoving, watching from the branches. If you blink, you might find him closer. End.